When you look at the people in working age, which is the 15 to 64 so-called magic number, looks like India is going to be in a very, very strong position over the next few decades. In fact, apparently at the turn of the century, you'll still have 1 billion plus people of working age in this country, when China will have about, I think, half of that or less than that.
Let me make a somewhat provocative point. There are some parts of the world that have been fantastically successful in narrowing regional differences. And I think that India could do it.
India's population growth, we talk about it as positive, but within India, there are regional disparities in population growth. Certain parts of India, mainly the south of India, have population growths which are practically on par with developed nations now. And the northern part of the country has a very high rate of population growth. And there is also disparity in skill levels in regions within India. So how does this play out? Below this great grand number of India has become number one and the population rate growth is healthy, that our working age people are going to be great. Within that, how does the regional disparities in skill and growth rate play out, and what are the possibilities, what are the consequences of that, sir?
That's a very good question. I think it's a very good starting point for this conversation. I was actually quite surprised when I looked at the India data on income per capita across the various states. These regional differences in income per capita are quite common throughout the world. If you look at federal states, the United States, if you look at the European Union, you will see these differences, right? There are a couple of things that are surprising about the Indian data. One is just how big the gap is. You have a state like Kerala, which has an income per capita in PPP terms of over $9,000, which is, higher than Ukraine was before the war, right? And then you have Bihar, which is, again on PPP terms, $2,000, all right? In other words, practically 1/5 of that of Kerala. If you go back to 1990 and you look at the income per capita of the 3 richest states, and you compare it with the income per capita of the 3 poorest states, that difference was 50%. 50%. And that is comparable to what you see in the United States today, what you see in the European Union, right? In fact, in those other parts of the world, there has been a tendency for catching up. The poorer countries regions grow faster than the richer countries, and eventually there's some level of catch up. In India, that 50% by today is 3 times. In other words, the gap has widened spectacularly, right? Your rich regions are becoming richer, your poorer regions are sort of staying behind in a big way. And this is concerning. Now, economists here and elsewhere have looked at this issue and have tried to come up with explanations. They say, well, the poorer regions have very poor infrastructure, they have a lot of red tape, it's difficult to do business, they have an unfriendly environment, and so on and so forth. Some people will say maybe the growth model in India in general has accentuated the regional differences because it has been based on skills-intensive industries like IT, and not labor-intensive industries like manufacturing and so on, right? Let me make a somewhat provocative point. There are some parts of the world that have been fantastically successful in narrowing regional differences. And I think that India could do it. India could do it. When I was in my late 20s, I was the IMF economist for Spain. And at that time, Spain was essentially rapidly integrating into the European economy. Together with Portugal, they joined the European Union at the same time, and they were sort of the poor cousins of Europe, right? They were your Bihars of India. You know, huge difference in income per capita with respect to Germany, the Netherlands, and France, right? You look at the data today, and Spain has caught up, right? Has caught up. In other words, it has gone in exactly the reverse direction of what's happening in India. So how has this happened? Well, the European Union, for its members, has an explicit program, we call it fiscal federalism. It basically consists in countries like Germany and the Netherlands will have an income per capita that is above the average, transfer resources through the European Union budget to the countries that have income per capita below the average, right? And they do it largely, you know, through investments in infrastructure. So Spain and Portugal receive massive amounts of money through the European Union budget from Germany and the Netherlands and France and the rich members, right? And this is what contributed to this conversion, right? I don't think you can do this convergence in India unless you do something like that, where you have an explicit program of transfers through the tax system from the richer regions to the poorer regions. If you don't do that, these differences are going to accentuate, and the problem with income disparities of this nature is that soon they become a political problem, not just an economic problem.